Yeah, we're good.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
No. Barely?
Should I speak louder? Well, if you use the mic, we're going to have to pass it back and forth. So do you have a preference?
Either's fine.
Fine.
Yeah, you're fine at normal speaking volume without the mic.
Can you hear me at the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Project loudly.
Okay. Remind us if we need to project to start waving. So great to see all your smiling faces. This is a session that we thought would be interesting to do because the community in the Austin Foundation is primarily geographic. And over the years, we've had experiments in thematic chapters. So there's been a food chapter, there's been a chapter that was organized for alumni of Tufts University. There's been, what else do we have in thematic chapters? We had a journalism chapter. And this is, I would say, the first time in the life cycle of the Austin Foundation that we have 3 healthy thematic chapters all going at the same time and with all the deans at a summit. So this is an opportunity, I think, for us to learn together about how thematic chapters are fitting into the Austin Foundation ecosystem. But also, selfishly, I want to build a resource from this panel so the next time somebody writes in and says, I want to start a thematic chapter, I have something to say to them. Which is basically, watch this panel. So, watch this panel. So, here with me, I have Steve from the Vegan chapter, Tiffany from the Disability chapter, and Josh from the Libraries chapter. And we're just going to jump right in. I think this is probably going to take maybe half an hour. We're going to talk, and then we're going to turn it back to all of you because you probably have better questions than I do. And we're basically just going to have a discussion about how thematic chapters are working and maybe what the future of thematic chapters in the Austin Foundation model might be. So let's start just one by one. I want to hear a little bit about yourself and about your chapter.
Okay, so I'm Steve Calnan. Our chapter's been running for 17 months. And I originally learned about the Austin Foundation through the Oakland Chapter. And I was a trustee for about a year and a half. I was sub-dean for a month, and that taught me everything I needed to know. But it's a really great model to understand how the chapters work and how the voting works and the spirit of the Austin Foundation. And one thing, being an ethical vegan, meaning that we're concerned with the exploitation of animals that is unnecessary, to the extent that if you want to remain a functioning member of human society, you have to make a lot of compromises, but where you can avoid it, don't use an animal, right? So you've probably all seen, notably I learned about the meat piñata project. Like that would be a proposal.
Can you speak
that
up a little bit?
If it came to Oakland, would be like...
Louder, please.
Oh,
Thank
okay,
you.
even louder.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm screaming it all.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Tiffany.
All right, so the Oakland chapter was awesome. They were very on the first meeting. So because I'm ethically driven in this part of my life, I made it clear on the first meeting. It was like the inaugural meeting, so we're all new trustees, and I made it really clear that look, hey, you're probably going to kick me out of the meeting after I finish saying this, but I can see already looking at the proposals that we have to go through. There's some things there that I just can't vote for, and I'm not saying that I would try to veto it, but if you're going to try to raise chickens on your backyard, I just can't. I explained why I can't vote for that and why it's a concern to me. And rather than kicking me out, everybody was actually really supportive, and they're like, okay, we will all adopt this policy. So pretty much any proposal that came through that had any kind of obvious, for a non-vegan it's not always obvious, but any obvious animal exploitation, we basically just assumed was no good. So that gave me this idea. It's well, why couldn't we have a chapter that was only, proposals that somehow tried to reduce the exploitation of animals, usually through diet. So we're mostly a food chapter now because that's the #1 consumer action people can take. But anyway, I just sent an email to, so I'm just talking who I am and what my chapter does, right? I'm totally off the rails.
Hi everyone. My name is Tiffany and I'm the founder and the dean of the Disability chapter. And if you want to learn about how our chapter came to be, you can watch my lightning talk from the 2017 Summit. And so I started this chapter in April 2015, so now we're in our 26th month. We've awarded $26,500 to 27 projects in 6 countries. And so all of our trustees are disabled. We kind of range from 11 to 14. We award $1,000 every month. We've had a couple months where we have a runner-up where we'll give them $500 to $1,000 as well. And we receive about 60 submissions over a 2-week period that we're open every month.
Hello everyone, I'm Josh Finnell. I'm the co-founder and dean of Awesome Libraries. We started in January 2017, which I guess makes us the oldest thematic chapter here. We have funded 12 projects over 7 countries. We are a global chapter as well. A lot of people ask how you define the scope of libraries. We define it rather broadly, with a caveat that we do not actually fund self-published books, which is our largest grant submission. However, we're intentional about 4 criteria, which are we want projects that emphasize diversity, inclusivity, creativity, and risk-taking. And we expect our trustees to think about projects through that lens.
So I wonder if I could ask each of you to share with us 1 or maybe 2 at most of your most awesome projects that your chapter supported, or something that you think would be illustrative to the audience of what kinds of things your chapter does. Who wants to jump on that one first?
You want to pass it back?
I'll share 2. I'll share this one because it was actually our first project we ever funded. It's special since we're in Chicago. So our first project was out of Summit, Illinois, if anyone is familiar with Summit, Illinois. It was the Warehouse Project in Gallery Space, which is kind of a youth art center. They were celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the Summit Library. And so they were going to send out all the kids into the town to create 100 selfies for 100 years of library users. And they were going to take selfies with the actual folks in the town and then actually collect their stories and then display them in the library to celebrate the 100 years. And that was a special one that we funded.
I guess 2 projects come to mind. So one is based in London. We funded an adaptive rock climbing wall for traumatic brain injury survivors, which I thought was pretty cool as an adaptive climber myself. And then our latest one actually came out of Kampala in Uganda, and it's a program around kind of raising awareness around reproductive and health rights for deaf adolescent youth.
Our first project that we funded was a really good one. There were a lot of refugees in Greek islands, and a kitchen who serves food to refugees and refugee camps. We're supporting some protesters who are protesting the living conditions in these refugee camps. So they happen to be vegan, so they happen to make vegan food, but mostly they were supporting the people who were protesting, and we just thought that was a great sort of intersection. And another one is in Cape Town, a walk to go to a rock festival. It's called Rock the Daisies or something, and 150 people get together and go on like this little pilgrimage, and they like clean up and they do environmental stuff and yoga and stuff like that. And they're like, hey, we just want to offer vegan lunches for this thing, so can you give us a grant to just do like plant-based lunches? So that was kind of a nice one.
So one thing that I think is interesting about thematic chapters is that in the same way that geographic chapters are a community coming together to support a community, the thematic chapters represent distinct communities supporting their own communities. So I wonder if you could each tell me a little bit about who your trustees are, where do you find them, and how do you keep them engaged, given that all 3 of these are global chapters?
Yeah, so this may surprise you, but librarians are extremely organized individuals. With this. Library Twitter is also very active. So all of our trustees are actually librarians, both nationally and globally. So we've had trustees from all across the United States. We've had the director of the African Law Library in Switzerland. We've had a project director for the Indigenous Digital Archive be a trustee. How we find them is pretty simple. How we keep them engaged is a lot more challenging. We do not actually meet, and we have never met as a global trustee cohort ever in our existence.
How many?
So we have currently 12 trustees, that's with 3 deans, but we have churned over 16 trustees during our 3 years in existence. Does that answer all the questions? Am I missing one?
And do you have some that are sponsored by others? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, thinking about inclusivity and as well as our diversity, we didn't want to make generational wealth to be a barrier for participation. So if someone wants to be a trustee, we think of ways for them to be sponsored by others who simply want to donate for their spot. So we try to open up spaces that way as much as possible.
So most of our trustees, when we first started, were my friends, and over time, I think as a function of, every single time we need to do a call for trustees, I'll create one of these like click to tweets, which if you click the link, it'll automatically open Twitter and you can share it. And so we've been able to find some of our trustees through those channels and through the networks of our current trustees. But we've had quite a bit of turnover as well. You know, I think with disability, there's an additional layer of things to think about. So if someone's job situation changes, if a sudden health thing comes up, one of our trustees has passed away, those are things to think about. And I always try to ask our trustees to give me advance notice, but a lot of times you can't plan for these types of things. All of our trustees are paying members. I think that's part of the ethos of what we want to stand for. And we are really passionate and I think embedded in our values this idea of participatory funding and grant making. So how can the people who your project will support, how can we, take control of our own future and fund our own future as well? So that's that.
We have 8 trustees now. I think we had 11 at one point. We're mostly women, thanks to the unreliability of the male trustees. So we only have three men, 5 women. And we're more than happy to have more trustees, so if you know anybody. But we're more than happy to have sponsored seats as well, but you just have to find 2 people instead of 1, one to sponsor and 1 to actually vote. And we, mostly through social networking and professional networking. Unfortunately, everybody's kind of local to the San Francisco Bay Area with a couple exceptions. So we would love to have some global trustees, but like our social networks aren't that expansive yet.
So you're all geographically decentralized groups. How do you make decisions if you don't see each other, don't meet each other? How do you collect the money in the bag? Does the cash in the bag thing actually work for global thematic chapters? Who wants to grab that one?
So that, I think money's been the hugest pain in my ass for this project, both because I just have a congenital problem with managing money correctly, but also because we don't have like a bag of cash, we don't have pitch parties, so it's like, it'd be great if we just slapped down $100 and just handed it out, no problem. So we use Venmo to collect dues in every case, but distributing it is difficult internationally because Venmo isn't available in every country. PayPal is more accessible, but I swear I actually had to send a check out on our last prize, which was interesting. So all this money eventually kind of ends up going through my personal account, and I don't really feel great about that. But what am I going to do? I guess maybe somebody could accuse me of laundering, but I do have some other records. So that's so that's rough. Otherwise, we just meet on Hangouts once a month. Some of our meetings are only 10 minutes, some are 20 minutes. We use the awesome button on the UI to basically vote. We sort by votes, and we just discovered that it might be possible to vote in another chapter's proposals. I'm not sure about that, but I think that I don't know, some weird stuff on the UI. But it works well enough.
You could go through our grants and help us choose. That'd be okay.
Yeah, well, the answer is all of Nicole's votes for yours show up in the Portland list.
And New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's really just Nicole's fault.
So this is a feature of when you have a trustee that's a member of 2 chapters. Things get a little confusing.
Thank you for.
well, Nicole is aware.
So all of our communication is done online. We started with a Facebook group, and now we've moved over to Slack. Slack is accessible for those who are curious, and actually this whole process has been really a learning experience for me from an accessibility perspective, because I need to make sure that the awesomefoundation.org website is accessible, and any any ways that we communicate are also accessible to a variety of different types of disabilities. But yeah, so we use everything online. We have met in person / Google Hangout once, but mainly on a social level to try and like increase the stickiness of trustees wanting to stay with us. But I will agree, I think getting, so I'm a former banker, so I have everything stored in Excel spreadsheets. So I'm pretty organized too, which means that I could be a librarian. But I'm our treasurer, and right now our social media person, and our dean, and then I'm the one who's contacting the winner and sending out the wire transfers internationally as well. For this adaptive rock climbing wall, I like wired them the money, and then it was declined, and then I mailed them a check, and then their bank lost the check, and then I just tried wiring them the money again. So that is not a good experience for the winner, and it makes us look really disorganized as well. And this is actually the second time we've gone through some pretty tricky international wire situations.
Yeah, I can just really echo the experiences you've heard. We use Venmo and PayPal for all of our financial transactions. Thankfully, we have not hit a snag yet, but I'm sure it's coming. I mentioned it earlier, engagement's one of our biggest challenges because our voting process largely works through ranked vote on a Google form, which essentially gives us kind of our top 3 projects for each funding model. And then we try to have a Skype or Google Hangout call. But again, working across global trustees, you can imagine how many time zones that consists of. I'm not really interested in meeting at 2 a.m. and none of the other trustees are as well. So we try to rely upon email back and forth as best we can. But it was, an earlier breakout session, I was just really excited to hear that everyone said the best part is the discussion around the voting, and it's the one thing that we kind of lack in our chapter that we'd like to amplify going forward, is having that shared discussion with our trustees. So it's one of our challenges going forward.
So we've chatted about the relationship with trustees, and I'd like to switch now and talk about the relationship with grantees, and particularly how they find you. So I think a lot of geographic chapters find the challenge and find solutions to marketing themselves geographically. Are you able to market yourselves globally in your communities? How do people find you?
We don't know. When we first got together to vote, we already had 18 proposals waiting for us. This was like, we'd just been added to the website. So we just went with that, like, oh, it's magic, and they'll just keep coming. And so far, that's been true. We do get 25 roughly a month. So the only promotion we do is like some very, very anemic social media stuff. We can think of it with one exception. Aaron, one of our trustees, did a year in review on our Facebook page of some of the people who reported back with like their success, and that's probably been our biggest like social media thing we've ever done. But I just realized during this weekend that I need to put the like, how did you find out about us field on our application. It's just not there. So that's bad.
So maybe this is a request for the tech team. So our 3 optional questions are: 1, if you included images, can you please describe them? 2, do you identify as disabled? Note, we don't accept submissions for your personal medical needs or your car troubles or rent or etc. And 3, did you apply to any other awesome foundation chapter? And I would love to be able to add how did you find us, because we actually do no marketing. I would like to have fewer submissions, and I was talking to a couple of the other trustees here about how I know a lot of your local chapters have funded disability projects. They don't just have to come through the disability chapter, but even when they have that avenue as well, we're still getting massive volume. And I think that
How many a month?
we're getting about 60 a month. And then when you guys did that AdWords thing,
Okay.
we got 150.
Oh, wow.
And this past month we had 90, and I always check in with Ingrid and some of our other trustees. I'm like, how are you doing with the volume? Do we need someone to go in and like hide some of them? And we're only open for 2 weeks each month. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do to get fewer, but we can talk. We can talk. Yeah, we have some ideas around that, but.
Yeah, so we fund on a quarterly model, and so over a 3-month period, I'd say we get anywhere from 100 to 150 submissions per cycle. We actually don't do any marketing really, other than like an occasional tweet around opening up. When we first launched in 2017, we had a pretty big lift. We were featured in Library Journal, in the Library with the Lead Pipe, Public Library Quarterly, publications I'm sure on all of your coffee tables at home. And so we got a pretty big signal boost from the library community, and I think that gave us a nice bump, and then it's just been consistent ever since.
So I'm stepping back now from some of the logistical questions. Has this Awesome Foundation thing turned out remotely the way you expected it to? And is there something that you wish somebody had told you or you had known at the beginning?
Yeah, so I mean, our chapter launched out of a larger parent organization, which at the time was called Library Pipeline, and it was focused on innovation in libraries. And the reason why we formed is because the whole emphasis behind that initiative was to create a kind of crowdfunding platform. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we found Library Foundation. But what I wish I would have known at the beginning is that I wish I knew the Awesome Summit was a thing that I could attend, because I think back to, had we attended this summit when we were launching, it would have given us a lot of great ideas about how to organize, facilitate discussion, voting, figuring out the website, things like that. But overall, I think it's worked out smashingly well. I'd say.
I will say, of all the disability things that I do, and I do quite a bit, this is probably the most exciting, impactful thing that I could be working on. And it honestly requires the least amount of work from me, just contributing $100 a month and then incessantly nagging people on Slack to send me money. But if I could, yeah, I remember, and I told Avi this, when I was at the summit a year and a half ago, we were only 6 months old, and no one really knew, no one here within the Awesome Foundation community really knew that we existed. And Avi was like, most of our thematic chapters don't make it past 2 years. And so April was our 2-year mark. It's crazy to me that we've awarded over $25,000 in grants to projects all across the world. I think about every single time we award a grant internationally, how far that money goes. And then I think within the disability community, it makes me like look kind of cool. So interestingly enough, Ingrid actually invited me to come give a talk to like some philanthropists, and I'd actually never put what I did with Awesome Foundation at the intersection of disability and philanthropy. And then I was like, I need to put this on my LinkedIn headline. That like, watch her talk again, whatever she said, again. And so and then actually after Ingrid's talk, she's like, you know how big of a deal, and I'm getting like a little bit emotional, but she's like, do you know how big of a deal this is? And I think when I started this, I didn't. I'm just really hoping, in our intros, I'm hoping we're still around 10 years from now, and that I'm not dean anymore, but.
Okay, I just learned we have to make it to December. Right? If we wanna, I think we can do that. I think logistically everything was pretty straightforward, but just to get such wide-reaching, wildly different proposals from all around the world on a regular basis is like, it's like really, it feels great that so many people are coming up with creative projects. It gives me a little anxiety because there's just too many for us to fund, right? I mean, every chapter has that problem. But I think that the dedication of our core dedicated trustees has been like the best part that I didn't really think about or have many expectations for. But they're really the ones who are keeping this going, especially since we have no face-to-face and no in real life experience. It takes, it's easier to meet, on Hangouts or whatever, but I think that the social glue is probably looser. But, our core trustees have really stuck together and made it possible. I'm just so grateful for that and happy about that.
So I have two more questions for you, and then I'm just giving a heads up to the audience that I'm going to turn to all of you for your thoughts and questions and contributions, so start thinking. So is there something that you've learned about at the summit that you're planning to try out with your chapter, or something on the flip side that a chapter learned about from you that you think they might try out?
I can start, we'll change it up even though we're all answering the questions. One thing I actually think would be super interesting is if our trustees actually transitioned into their local chapters. And again, I was talking to someone, what's your name again? Ryan? Patrick. I was going to say Ryan, and I was like, my eyesight is so bad. I can't. So I was talking to Ryan earlier, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I just called you Ryan. I was talking to Patrick earlier. And I was telling him that, you know, disability submissions don't just come to the disability chapter, they come to all of your chapters, and disabled people don't just need to be trustees in the disability chapter, we should be trustees in your chapters as well. So, and one thing I had actually talked to Ingrid about is kind of using Awesome Foundation Disability as a way for our disabled trustees to kind of like a landing pad to then enter larger philanthropy circles and conversations. So I really like the idea that I heard earlier about like libraries and DC kind of partnering up. And I guess I would like to see if there's a way that our chapter can kind of join forces with some of the local chapters.
Yeah, certainly collaborations are something. We're doing a collaboration with Awesome DC in June at the American Library Association, and so we'd really like to partner with geographic chapters going forward. Something I learned in the breakout session about what to do with unfunded projects, I believe it was Celeste, New York City. They do awesome talks, I think I'm saying that correctly, with unfunded projects. So it's an opportunity that even if a project doesn't receive funding, there's still an opportunity to build a community and have those individuals kind of boost their message out to the community itself. So thinking about these collaborations going forward in the libraries chapter, where we usually do these live pitch events in collaboration with library events such as the American Library Association, it'd be nice to also open up a space to kind of do talks for some of those projects as well.
One other thing, sorry. I would really like a Disability is Awesome button. That's all. So I don't think I've met the person from the button place. Oh, okay. Let's talk.
I took some notes, things like for unfunded projects. I think some really good ideas there about. Well, so this is the thing. We added to our application, like, if you don't win, is there any way that we can support you in some other way? You know, like so, like, you know, Instagram. Do you have like some kind of crowdfunding thing going or something like that? So we're now collecting this opportunity, but now we have to execute on it. So that's one thing about that. But things that I've learned here that we should really do is consider a sliding scale for trustees, considering bringing grantees in as trustees. Might be a little bit different, you know, not having face-to-face. Making our selection guidelines more explicit, like we have like an implicit guidelines that we use as trustees of like what makes a good proposal. But why not just put them right there on the page and just make it clear, just like hopefully sort out some of those proposals. Link to good examples of proposals with permissions of the writers, and actually set up like a separate website maybe that's just the go-to for all this about this particular chapter, rather than like one of the pages where you just have the application text. So a lot of stuff to work on. I mean, I have even more, and I'm just too confused to go through them. Oh, also video applications. Thanks for that idea. Possibly looking into video applications so that people don't have to necessarily fill out the application.
Thanks. So last question for me, so another warning to the audience that I'm going to be looking soon for your questions. So what's next for your chapters? So we've heard from each of you that you get a lot of applications, and I tried to get some numbers before I came here about like how many vegans there are in the world, and this is actually a tough question to answer. And we know there's like 1 billion people living with disabilities on the planet, and I think I saw there were like a few 100,000 librarians in the U.S. Is that possible? And so clearly there's room for growth here. What does that look like? Are you thinking about that?
No. It's too big.
Well, so one thing that one thing that Avi and I talked about was the potential for maybe a Disability North America to like split out into regional thematic chapters to better handle the volume. But to be honest, the one thing I worry about is I just need people to give me money. Disabled people to give me money, sorry. If they don't vote, if they don't do anything else, I'm actually totally fine with that. I was gonna say the bar is low, but that's actually a pretty high bar, unfortunately, with some of the realities in our community. And so in terms of like looking to the future, I don't know. I'm still just as excited about Awesome Disability as I was 2 years ago. I don't think that energy is going away anytime soon. Yeah, I think if people have ideas about how we can, and I really wanted as many of our trustees as possible to come to the summit because this is where stickiness is created, right? And again, accessibility and other things, it's just hard for people to come. And so, yeah, I just want to try to figure out how can we keep our trustees longer, and really make them feel like they're a part of the Awesome Foundation community.
So in addition to our collaboration with DC and hopefully other chapters going forward, our biggest collaboration, kind of tapping into this large network of librarians, is we recently created a collaboration with John Kreska, who's in the back there, who has started Every Library Institute, which is the nation's first and arguably best political action committee. So they are going to function as our fiscal agent, our 501c3 status, which will allow us to take in donations and not let the Bank of Joshua Finnell be audited by the IRS, which is going to be lovely. And they are also, we're working a collaborative, it's Kickstarter-esque, but it's not Kickstarter. But again, thinking about these unfunded projects, the ability to give those projects space to find funding from the library community itself. Every library has a massive following, so if we can just get some of these great projects that we can't fund due to limited resources, if we can match them to people who would give money to it, that's going to be a really positive impact going forward. So we're kind of building out the Awesome Foundation chapter and connecting to the different nodes that are in the library community.
So I'm all out of questions, and I hope that having warned you now on several occasions that there are some in the audience, so why don't we start over here? You want to shout so we'll keep the mic up here? Yeah.
So I buttonholed Tiffany yesterday with a friend who had gotten a grant from the Chicago chapter and who was interested, who got a disability grant from the Chicago chapter and was interested in more. Was that like a bad idea? Like as we're trying to share back and forth awesome ideas that there are potentially multiple funding opportunities for, like, do we want to share back and forth, or do we want to kind of like grab them in and say, you know what, Chicago chapter can handle that, we already have more than we can handle being a global chapter?
Yeah, so Dave's question was, a former Chicago grant winner is thinking about applying to the disability chapter, and so I got to meet her yesterday. And I think that a misconception, actually I don't know if it's a misconception, but I feel like some people think that it's easy to apply for a grant from our chapter, from not disability specifically, from any of our chapters. And so I have friends coming to me being like, I'm gonna apply for a grant from Awesome Disability for my ADHD support group. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, she thinks that telling me is gonna give her an in, even though I don't vote. And so I think we welcome, and we have had some email exchanges between chapters, regional chapters and our chapter around applications that the city chapter thought was good but wanted to refer them over to us. And for anyone who has actually ever emailed us, I have a very kind of bland auto response that says, we just can't handle the volume of people emailing us inquiries, and if you want to be considered, you have to apply through the form. So yeah, I think we like welcome those, but the response will be, you know, you need to submit it within our window, and then it's really up to the trustees to vote on it.
Is that the same for like the vegan and library chapter? Like, is it better for geographies to try to keep their stuff local and
I don't know. I think I agree that it should, if it, as long as it goes through, the application. I mean, everything's. I mean, why not? I mean, widen the funnel. Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I was just peeking at the awesome catalog, which is super helpful, by the way. And I think there were 113 grants that are marked library. So obviously, regional chapters have been doing the work because we've only funded 12. So good job.
I think the next hand that went up was Terry, so we'll get to Terry next.
I'm wondering about the range of types of disabilities in your trustees. Does it cover everything?
Everything. No. So that's what's really interesting about this word disability, because it describes a lot of things that actually have nothing to do with each other. But to be honest, what I find the people who are showing up and who are financially able to contribute, I would say, like, I have a physical disability. We have a couple who are blind, low vision, a couple who are wheelchair users. We don't ask people to disclose. Some people have mental health conditions, but we give everyone the space to self-identify. So we do have a trustee intake form that we copied from libraries or journalism, I can't remember. And one of the questions that we put on there is, do you identify as a person with a disability? And we don't ask them to specify. But I will say we probably don't have anyone who has an intellectual or developmental disability. Yeah. Yeah, so Ingrid was just saying, I think what's really interesting is the majority of our trustees would identify as people who are very proud of the fact that we are disabled. And I think that collective identity is what brings people to want to be trustees in our chapter.
Let's go to Pentia.
And not everyone has that school of thought who is disabled.
This is related, so hold on to the mic. So do you, have you considered expanding to family members of disabled as part of your trustee?
So this was a conversation we were actually having last year, because we had a lot of very excited people who had friends and connections that were siblings or family members and like wanted to sponsor a spot. And when we launched, we actually wrote an article about why we wanted all of us to be disabled. Because really for us, I don't know if you guys know the stats, but Americans with disabilities are twice as likely to live in poverty as those who aren't. And so the fact that we have a chapter that is entirely funded by disabled people is signaling to the rest of the world that like we do have buying power, and we just want to take control of our own future. And that's not to say that we have given money to non-disabled submissions from non-disabled people, but yeah, I think, and that's the hard part too, right? Because I'm like, I just need money, right? And if you listen to my talk from 2017, like I'm an ex-banker. I feel like I can find like 10 of my finance friends to just like, here you go. But Alice Wong, who co-founded Awesome Disability with me, was like, Tiffany, what would happen if all of your trustees were disabled? And that actually took me like 3 months to find our first group. So yeah, Ingrid, I don't know.
The relationship between people with disabilities and family members is a really rich topic to bring into things. The reality is that a lot of us with disabilities wouldn't be living the lives that we are had it not been for family members who, have been our strongest support systems, allies, and sometimes they become disabled people themselves. The thing is though, as that kind of nervous was out of the door.
So for those who couldn't hear Ingrid, she said, you know, we don't want to erase the interdependence that exists between the fact that we are able to live the lives that we live with the non-disabled people who have helped support us. But at the same time, she said, like, every time we give a grant, it's making a statement.
So we've got time for probably 2 or 3 more questions. Who should go to Patrick or Ryan?
I literally just looked around and looked. 2 questions for you, Joshua, actually. So the first one was you mentioned that you sometimes have a trustee sponsor another trustee, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. And also, I'm curious about your collaboration with us in DC.
Yeah, so the sponsorship is fairly straightforward. I think other chapters here might have a sponsorship model as well, which is on our application form we actually have people mark whether they can actually make the financial contribution or they need a sponsor. And so if the applicant fits our other criteria for inclusion, we will then go out and try to find someone. The trustees will try to leverage our friends or find someone else to basically sponsor that individual. So that's kind of how our sponsorship model works. I said this in the breakout session, I think when we first launched, I think everyone who applied to be a trustee wanted to be sponsored, which doesn't work well for a model in which you need money to go out as opposed to from the trustees themselves. The awesome DC collaboration is still bubbling forward, but it's off and running. We did our call for proposals that went out May 1st. This will be at the American Library Association conference, or at least in collaboration with it. It'll be hosted at Open Gov Hub, and we're going to give 3 awards. So we wanted to make it equitable split. So DC will give out an award for $1,000. We're going to award a project based off of libraries, and then we're going to have an audience participation award. But we hope that this will bring together the 50,000 plus librarians in attendance. We can only hold 125, Alex, is that right? With the DC community. So in addition to doing the pitch, I think the hope is there's this, again, this organic mix of people thinking about libraries and their community and their impact. So we hope that's an outgrowth of it, and we hope to continue that model. Great question, Ryan.
I don't have a question, but I do have a trustee who is heavily involved with our university's library, and he's not here this weekend because they're having an event. I need to connect you with him.
Please do.
Yes.
Is this a paying trustee or a...
Paying trustee.
Even better.
Anybody? Terry?
This is a question for Avi.
Yes.
Is our website fully accessible, like, for blind readers?
So, the only way I could get Wale, he actually works for the New York City mayor's office, and he is blind, and he was like, hey Tiffany, so he's a founding trustee and has been with us for now 26 months. He was like, the only way I will be a trustee is if your website is accessible. So I put him in touch with Jesse, and then they worked together on making sure that as a trustee he's able to access everything he's needed to.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, Jesse.
So we've still got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Let's go to Teresa.
For all of you, do you have trustees in every inhabited continent? Is that something you're working on if you don't?
Would love to have it, not really working on it, but yeah, like I said earlier, like that my social network just doesn't have the mycelium to cross oceans yet, but I would love to.
When we started, we had a trustee from South Africa, and then we have one from New Zealand, and the rest are US based. And now we still have the New Zealand one, and now the rest of us are US based. But I would love, I think the transferring of the money from the trustee to the dean or the treasurer, like for the New Zealand guy, I think he incurs like a $4 charge every single time he sends me money, and then I need to make sure I have an extra pool. If he sends me his receipts, I'll like reimburse him for those extra fees as well. But yeah, we're open.
When we first launched, we had Europe and Africa covered. We have since contracted. Our only global trustee currently is from Nigeria. The rest are all US based, and they're all academic librarians. So we're hoping in our application push to again push out globally as best we can.
Last call?
All All right, well, thank you very much to the three of you. Oh.
I just want to say one more thing. Sorry, I was gonna like pull a Kanye or something, but I think it would be really cool, and I have been mentioning this to some of you, to see more thematic chapters around identity groups formed. So I've had friends come to me wanting to start like maybe an awesome POC, people of color, awesome women, awesome queer. Another friend was thinking like awesome homelessness. Like there's no shortage, and again, if you think about like orphan versus flamethrower, like these are more on the orphan side, but you can see just by the fact, like when you presented yesterday and you were like, we received 9 submissions per month. I was like, oh, like you can really only pick one, so it's even okay if you receive 5 per, or 3 or 2 per month, you know? And so I think the reason why we keep going is because we continue to get submissions, right? I mean, that's why all of our chapters are here, in addition to our trustees giving us money. But yeah, I would really love to see more thematic chapters. I'm happy to be a resource as those come to fruition.
I just wanted to echo that. I think certainly in the American Giving Circle space, and I'm not sure I even want to describe Austin Foundation as a Giving Circle community, but in the Giving Circle space, we see a lot of race-based giving circles, a lot of religion-based giving circles, but there are so many other identities that just don't seem to be present in the space, and I think the Austin Foundation gives a welcoming community and a place to explore these things. And Tiffany and I were talking about this earlier, and I don't think this is in the immediate future, but I do wonder if in a way the Austin Foundation can be incubating entire networks of other identity-based giving circles, that down the road we will see even city-based chapters of various identity groups that go beyond this kind of race and religion categories. So thanks again to the three of you, both for being here on the panel today and also for your work over the last 2 years advancing this experiment inside the Austin Foundation ecosystem of thematic chapters. And I hope that we'll do this again in a summit or two, and we will have too many deans of thematic chapters to put on a panel altogether, so I don't know what we're going to do then. And so I hope that was interesting to all of you, and thanks again for participating.